I do want to preface that I'm reading the hardcover version of the book. So in chapter 11, there are some pictures of Susan that you can sort of see. Now, this version has pictures at chapter 11 and a soft cover book, which you can see in the back of my video. There are pictures, actually different ones, around chapter 14. So I just want to point out that there are slight differences with different editions or versions of Susan's book, which might be interesting. There are some pictures like this one. I don't believe, not both books or different versions of the book don't have the same exact pictures. So if anyone is paying attention to maybe a physical copy of Susan's book, just know that there are different pictures. So here's the beginning of chapter 11. Chapter 11, Helter Skelter. When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide, where I stop and I turn and I go for a ride, till I get to the bottom and I see you again. Do you, don't you want me to love you? I'm coming down fast, but I'm miles above you. Tell me, tell me, tell me, come on, tell me the answer. You may be a lover, but you ain't no dancer. Helter skelter, helter skelter, helter skelter. Will you, won't you make me want to make you? I'm coming down fast, but don't let me break you. Tell me, tell me, tell me the answer. You may be a lover, but you ain't no dancer. Look out, helter skelter, helter skelter, helter skelter. Look out, 'cause here she comes. When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide. And I stop, and I turn, and I go for a ride. And I get to the bottom, and I see you again. Well, do you? Don't you want me to make you? I'm coming down fast, but don't let me break you. Tell me, tell me, tell me the answer. You may be a lover, but you ain't no dancer. Look out, helter skelter, helter skelter, helter skelter. Look out, helter skelter. She's coming down fast. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Helter Skelter, Lennon McCartney, The Beatles, 1968. Charlie obtained the Beatles' so-called White Album in late 1968. It had a tremendous impact on our lives, especially Charlie's. One night when many of us were playing records and listening to the album, Charlie said, "They're speaking to me." He was convinced that he had some sort of apocalyptic connection with the Beatles. I never fully understood it, but I knew Charlie, our unchallenged leader, was deeply affected. And I, and most of the others, believed that in some way, Helter Skelter, the end of the world, was coming down fast. But as always, our pattern was inconsistent. We were running Helter Skelter ourselves. For example, during this time we struck up a relationship with Dennis Wilson of the famous Beach Boys. I was never sure how Charlie got to know him. It undoubtedly had something to do with Charlie's own musical aspirations, plus our constant need for money. But at any rate, we spent a lot of time at Dennis's house on Sunset Boulevard. Large numbers of us lived there for irregular but sometimes lengthy periods. At one time, nearly a dozen of us stayed there, and at Dennis's expense had thousands of dollars worth of dental work done. Because of heavy drug use and neglect, our teeth were in constant disrepair. I was never sure whether Dennis tolerated us because he liked us, or Charlie, or because he feared us. But through him and others, we were often in contact with well-known, respected people within the Los Angeles, Hollywood, Beverly Hills community. We were great at crashing parties. Charlie was preaching constantly about the end of the world and the need to flee into the country, specifically into the desert. "We have to find a place to live," he said. And he was convinced that the desert was the place. None of us disagreed. We felt an intense pressure mounting on us, a pressure from society, especially the police. We were a strange gang, and the police watched us constantly. They knew Charlie was on parole, as were several others. They also knew, but had trouble proving, that we were heavy into dope, both using and, before long, dealing. They followed our bus frequently. The least little safety violation, a burned-out light for instance, brought them down on us. Large numbers of runaway kids were also showing up at spawns, looking for a place to stay or hide out. They were from all over the country: New England, the South, the Southwest, and up and down the West Coast. We felt an intense pressure to help them lie low until the heat was off. But most deeply, we felt that society was destroying itself, but that we were immune because we were in the thought. The early Christians had referred to themselves as being in the way. We were in the thought. We tuned into God, at least Charlie was, and the rest of us through him. But we believed we had to fight to survive. "We have to survive above all things," Charlie said, over and over. We thus made many trips to the desert, taking the bus as far as it would go, and walking even further. We explored places all over Death Valley. I had not known an area as desolate or impenetrable before. We had to have a way to travel. Then, we came across the idea of dune buggies. They were to be our solution. We had a place in the desert to go finally. One of the girls, Kathy, was the granddaughter of a woman who owned a place deep in the desert, Myers Ranch. Not too far away, less than half a mile, was another place we believed we could move into, Barker Ranch. But we needed transportation, dune buggies. We launched an all-out program to get them, and this led us into serious crime, which became like quicksand. We dealt dope actively to get money for the buggies. Tex during this time became one of our main dealers. We agreed to plan to build buggies using Volkswagen bodies, but engines and parts from other vehicles. This meant stealing cars, which we entered into on a fairly modest scale. The parts we didn't use, a whole chassis for example, were buried out back at the ranch. We were very expert, and many of the men who had either joined us or hung around a lot were excellent mechanics. As our desperation mounted, we began using shifts and working around the clock on the buggies. The rest of the world didn't understand, but we were serious. My loyalty to Charlie continued through all this, and probably heightened, although there were several moments when I wanted to leave. In fact, I did leave several times, staying with some hippie friends in the canyon or others in LA, but I always returned. Several of the other people did the same thing, but most of us, at least the core group, came back. We were hooked, even on the hysteria. Since the birth of my baby, Charlie had an additional grip on me to go along with my addiction to his internal power, which I thought was from God. If I got out of line, Charlie would either subtly maneuver me to the children and go to work on me about their security and future. He frequently became cruel, manifest most horribly when he would take my baby by the feet and swing him around and around high over his head and then down to within an inch of the rocky ground. He was crazy at those moments. But a split second later, he would seem to be full of love for the children, which he continued to think of as gods or kings. Despite his control over me, Charlie kept criticizing me for being too independent and disobedient. He played me like a yo-yo, first hugging and praising me, then demeaning me in some way. One night in the desert, we were walking some distance away from the others. He was dressed in a black cape and rather subdued, moody. He abruptly swung the cape around him and turned to me. "Sadie," he said softly, evilly. "The trouble with you is you don't fear me enough." He was wrong. I feared him deeply. But I was at the same time thoroughly committed to him and desired probably more than anything in the world to please him. My desire for his attention was an obsession. I was constantly torn up with the thought that he didn't like me very much, which he kept churning up within me by reminding me that I didn't like myself enough. The ugliest turn in our course to that point came when Charlie thought he had killed a black man. This sent a fresh wave of paranoia that gave us a vision of all-out war between blacks and whites that was to usher in helter-skelter. The end. Few of us knew any details, but we were told that Tex had been burned by a black man in a dope deal. The black man, Bernard Lotzapapa Crow, was said to have cheated Tex. I frankly assumed that Tex had ripped off the dope, but regardless, Charlie ended up going to Crow and ultimately shooting him, leaving him for dead. In fact, Crow was severely injured, with a bullet lodged next to his spine, and was on the hospital critical list for 18 days. Meantime, Charlie thought Crow was a Black Panther and was dead. He was terrified, figuring that the Panthers would come after us. To begin with, Charlie hated blacks, and this only intensified his fear. He often said that all the black men wanted was to get the little white girls, while he, Charlie, wanted to keep the race pure. I believe most of the analysts of the Manson family and its crimes failed to appreciate the impact the shooting of the black man had on future events. Vincent Bugliosi, the deputy district attorney who later prosecuted several of us, in my view, gave Charlie more credit for criminal intelligence than he deserved. Bugliosi seemed convinced that Charlie was leading some grandiose plot against the world, when, from where I was, Charlie was merely reacting for the most part to a situation that flew out of control. Initially, he was reacting to the supposed killing of the black man. He already felt a black-white Armageddon was coming, and then feared that the Crow case might trigger it. Charlie was not, in my opinion, trying to initiate the black-white showdown, but was merely reacting to it. To us, Helter Skelter was real. To the Beatles, their song was a takeoff on the use of a slippery slide in a children's park, to which they added some suggestive, primarily sexual connotations. To us, it meant things were going out of control in the world, and the end was coming. But we were reacting to it. It was running parallel to our crazy circumstances. We were not starting it. But we knew we had to survive it. Out in the desert, for example, where Charlie believed there was a bottomless pit in which we would escape the apocalypse and perhaps return to show the way to a new world. This was all very fuzzy, very tentative, very mixed up. But I am convinced that none of us believed Helter Skelter was something we were going to direct. I, for one, was somehow aware in my subconscious that things had slipped out of control with us, but I did nothing about it. The feeling broke over me when Charlie called us together one day. You know that they're after us. The cops, the niggers, the establishment, they're all after us. And they're all cracking down harder and harder. Everyone was grim-faced as we watched him. I'm going to start carrying a knife. Each of you might want to get one. That was always his way. A hint, a suggestion, and never a direct order to do something. This buck knife here, that's a good one. We watched him hold it aloft. It's not too big, but it can do the job. You might get yourself one and get it sharp. Keep it with you. We'll probably be getting some guns too. We'll have to learn how to handle them. And another thing, he said, taking a few steps across the floor. We ought to establish a guard here. We need to put guards on top of our buildings 24 hours a day. We can't afford to let them sneak in on us when we're not expecting it. I shook my head. What is this? I thought. 24-hour-a-day guards, 24-hour-a-day shifts on the buggies, knives, guns. But that wasn't all. We needed more money. So we started stealing more. We stole credit cards, especially gasoline company credit cards, to meet our soaring need for gasoline and mechanical parts for the dune buggies. I went creepy crawling with Linda into homes and garages, an expression that came from me as we practiced and mastered silent entry into places, armed with our knives, and moved about the occupied houses without being detected. Barefoot and old dark clothes, deadly earnest, we became expert in burglarizing right under the noses of our occupants. The fear and thrill were exhilarating. I had always liked danger, although it kept me close to hysteria and panic. Furthermore, I felt we were perfectly justified in what we were doing. We were in the thought, in the now, free from thought, escaping from a doomed society. Darting in and about the dark recesses of my mind was a thought that I had trouble articulating, however. It flitted in between the thoughts of knives, creepy crawling, stealing. It was a genuine awareness that something was happening to the ingredient we had once talked about so much. Love. What happened to our love for one another and for other people? I thought one night, in one of my more lucid moments, which were less and less frequent. I felt a similar concern in a number of the other girls, but none of us put our thoughts together. Our thinking had turned into something like this. We have real love, the kind Charlie talks about, and we have to protect this precious love. We have to protect it from the policemen. They are our arch enemies. Society is blind to the fact that it is under the control of those same enemies. Society is in fact one big prison yard, and the policemen are the guards. The policemen are getting worse. We have to retaliate. We have to attack before we are attacked. We need money to do this, but the money is ours. Everything in the world is ours. The homes, the cars, the credit cards. People only think these things are theirs, but nothing is real. The Beatles' White Album, which, it must be understood, we were being immersed in, along with consuming unimaginable quantities of drugs, had a song that summed up much of our thinking. It was entitled Piggies, and it seemed to liken the straight people of the world to pigs. It spoke of little piggies crawling in the dirt, and bigger piggies in starched white shirts stirring up the dirt. It criticized the unconcern of all the piggies about what was going on around them, and said they needed a damn good whacking. And the final verse told of the piggies and their piggy wives out for dinner, clutching forks and knives to eat their bacon. We had a friend over in Topanga Canyon, on Old Topanga Canyon Road, who had been kind to us in the last year. He had helped Mary with food and other things for her baby. His name was Gary Hinman. He was in his early 30s, big, husky, 6'2", with thinning, short-cropped hair, and a very gentle spirit. A kind man who practiced transcendental meditation. A music teacher, he was a homosexual who was attracted to Charlie and Bobby. One afternoon, Charlie came up to me as I was perched on a huge rock on the street near the movie set saloon. No one else was within earshot. "Sadie," he said, "you're not a frontline person. You're a behind-the-scenes person. Why are you always trying to get in the living room? You belong in the kitchen." He paused. "If you want to do something important, why don't you kill Gary and get his money?" His eyes stared hard into my face. The tension between us was palpable. But within me, I could hear the words. "I'll show him. I'll show him I could be just as tough as he can." The discussion ended abruptly for the moment. But 2 nights later, Charlie told 3 or 4 of us that the need for money was great. I wasn't sure exactly what the money was needed for, except for dune buggies. But Charlie told us that Gary had inherited $21,000. "I want you guys to go get it from him." He spoke directly to Bobby, Mary, and me. "He'll give it to you, I'm sure, but I want you to get it." His earlier words drove into my chest. "Why don't you kill Gary?" My body was frozen. I knew I wasn't rational. "I'll show him," I had said. I was out of control. I was a scared young woman. But somehow I sensed Charlie was just a scared little man. "Sexy Sadie, what have you done? You made a fool of everyone. You made a fool of everyone. Sexy Sadie, oh, what have you done? Sexy Sadie, you broke the rules. You laid it down for all to see. You laid it down for all to see. Sexy Sadie, oh, you broke the rules." One sunny day, the world was waiting for a lover. She came along to turn on everyone. Sexy Sadie, the greatest of them all. Sexy Sadie, how did you know the world was waiting just for you? The world was waiting just for you. Sexy Sadie, oh how did you know? Sexy Sadie, you'll get yours yet. However big you think you are, however big you think you are. Sexy Sadie, oh you'll get yours yet. We gave her everything we owned just to sit at her table. Just a smile would lighten everything. Sexy Sadie, she's the latest and the greatest of them all. She made a fool of everyone. Sexy Sadie. However big you think you are, Sexy Sadie. Sexy Sadie, Lennon McCartney, The Beatles, 1968.